Hello, welcome to For the Young at Heart. My name is Lucille Jerome, and our program focuses on a range of issues that families and senior citizens are interested in. It might be health care, it might be social issues, it might be, spirituality. Well, on today's program, we're going to take a look at multiple sclerosis. And my guest is Audrey Cecile. She's a clinical social worker at Partners Multiple Sclerosis Center at Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston. Welcome, Audrey. Thank you for coming today. There's so much misinformation about multiple sclerosis, and maybe we can just start off with what is multiple sclerosis?
Okay. Well, thank you for inviting me, Lucille. Multiple sclerosis is a progressive neurological disease. It affects the brain stem, and the optic nerves. The brain's like a switchboard that sends signals from the brain to a part of the body. Let's say you want to pick up a cup with water. Your brain, you think about it, your brain sends a signal to your arm, to your hand, you lift it up. But if you have multiple sclerosis and that part of your brain is affected, there are the covering around the nerve, there's scarring along that, and so it's sort of the message short circuits.
Okay.
So you want to pick up the cup of water, but you can't.
But you can't do it.
Typically, multiple sclerosis will affect not necessarily the arms, but more the legs.
Okay.
It can affect the eyes. Sometimes people lose vision in their eye, and that can be one of the initial symptoms. It's called optic neuritis.
Okay.
Most often, though, the vision comes back.
Oh, that will come back. Okay.
After the initial flare.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this flare that happens, what might be a typical onset for multiple sclerosis? Is there such a thing as a typical onset for multiple sclerosis?
Well, it varies, but more often than not, someone is diagnosed in their 20s and 30s.
Okay.
Although there are plenty of people who are diagnosed earlier as children or as older adults. Frequently, the first symptom is optic neuritis. Other symptoms that can occur at the time of onset include numbness and tingling, balance problems, a variety of symptoms that make up the picture of MS.
Would the numbness and tingling be like in the arms or the legs, or both?
Both.
Both, okay.
And it can be on one side or on both sides.
Okay.
And typically when MS is diagnosed, someone experiences a flare the first time and they may get a provisional diagnosis of MS. It's not until they have a second episode that you can actually say that it's MS.
Okay.
And there are a number of tools that help the neurologists do the diagnosis. Of course, the clinical exam. You go to your doctor, you tell the doctor what you've been experiencing, they understand what the symptoms are. They can do a series of neurological tests, touching your nose and walking and observing the patient. But these days, one of the strongest tools is the MRI. That's a picture of the brain. And it can show the scarring, it can show where the scarring is and how much damage there is.
All right, then.
There's also a test called the evoked potential, which measures the movements in the eye. And then additionally, they can do a spinal tap that shows some material that's in the spinal fluid. And all those together can kind of supplement the clinical diagnosis or the clinical observations.
Do we know what causes MS?
No.
No.
We don't.
Okay.
There are a number of theories. Actually, they're kind of, it's believed to be an immunological disease, which means that the body's attacking itself. There's some thinking about the fact that it may be due to either viral or some sort of bacterial infection that has occurred at some point in a person's life, and then for whatever reason becomes active.
Okay. Okay. So we don't know exactly what causes it.
Right.
We know some of the recent testing that can help to diagnose it.
Yeah.
You did say the typical age of onset is between the 20s and 30s, which means these are young people.
Yes.
So there's a lifespan here. I mean, they're going to live to be, what, 60s, 70s, 80s?
Right.
Is there a lifespan here? So how do they cope with all these years and these changes? Their family life.
Right. Right.
That's a lot. I'm sorry, I put a lot into that one statement.
Well, you hit it right on the head, because young people are typically in their, they're living with it for a long time. They can, someone who's diagnosed in their 20s can live with MS for upwards of 50 years. And so that means that their family is being impacted all this time. The other variable is that because it's a progressive disease, it may change over time. I'll give you an example.
Okay.
Someone in their 20s, a young person, has to think about, getting involved in relationships. Are they going to be able to have children? Are they going to be able to work? And then as they age, they may think about, am I going to be able to walk? Do I need to be in a wheelchair? Am I going to become a burden to my family? That's one of the biggest fears. I hear that a lot. People don't want to be a burden. They want to maintain their independence. So if there's anything that I can highlight today, it's the fact that it's important for individuals to maintain as much independence as they can.
For as long as possible?
Yes, for as long as possible.
Okay, all right then.
You asked specifically about families and how it affects families. Sometimes families become very nervous upon diagnosis, and they tend to be overprotective. I can tell you a little story. One patient said that her mother squeezed orange juice for her every day for 4 months, thinking that that was going to cure her or help her, before she kind of came to grips with the fact that there really wasn't anything that she as a mother could do other than support her daughter. And everybody deals with it differently. Right.
You just mentioned the mother trying to help her daughter. They might be young, the one with MS. I will start, can I use MS as a shorthand version? Yeah. So this person might be a mother of young children.
Yes.
This person might definitely be married, perhaps, or be an active person, maybe with a church or a synagogue.
Yes.
And this affects their motor abilities.
Yes.
So how do they then deal with that? What services might be available for this young mother, for example, nowadays? Maybe there were fewer many years ago, but nowadays, what would be available to help that person? And as that person ages, and there are different life stages, I'm just wondering what is available to help them stay at home longer, for example.
Well, that's a big issue. Your example of the young mother who's at home, just to give you a feel for what her difficulties may be. she may have a couple of young kids that want to go out and play, and she can't go outside in the hot weather because hot weather is very difficult because it increases core temperature and may set off some of the symptoms. So this young mother may have the need to have a fenced-in backyard so that she can watch her kids out the window. Or maybe her mother comes in and takes care of the kids for an hour a day, or maybe she has to hire help to come in. There are, usually on the front end, when people are first experiencing and living with MS, they're fairly able to live their lives. Fatigue is one of the most debilitating symptoms, and it is it's invisible. So that makes it really hard because the person with MS,
Yes. So it's so outwardly they don't look like they have any illness.
That's right. That's right.
So people could think they're malingering?
People could think they're malingering, and people could also say, "Oh, but you look so good. How are you feeling?" Well, but inside, you're feeling extremely tired and kind of wiped out.
Right.
But you asked about resources, and I want to get back to that because there are all the resources that someone would typically have in the home for help at home. Most of those, like if you need a housekeeper, or if you need a babysitter, or if you need a transportation, some transportation assistance, like the ride. And most communities have a transportation system that is perhaps available to seniors and those with disabilities.
So it would be essentially an illness like other illnesses in the sense that whatever home care services are available would be available for this particular group also.
Yes.
Essentially.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
And as someone progresses, as the illness progresses in someone, someone might require a personal care attendant to, for example, assist them with making meals, assist them with showering, assist them with by accompanying them to medical appointments. And a personal care attendant would really only be required if the person had severe mobility issues and needed help. But that they'd have to be pretty far progressed.
Yeah. What are some of the emotions? I mean, you touched on something earlier. What are some of the emotions that people with this diagnosis typically might feel? I can imagine maybe feeling denial at first, maybe some anger, maybe some anger.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Some frustration that your body's not letting you do what you're wanting it to do. I mean, those are off the top of my head, but what are some of the things?
Well, I think that denial is quite frequent. Up front in the early part of a diagnosis. I think some worry, anxiety about the uncertainty of their future, because there's no typical course. The doctors can't really predict or tell an individual what to expect because it depends on that person's physiological makeup. It depends on their body and the nature of their disease. So dealing with uncertainty is a big issue. A lot of times people worry about having dreams about
the dreams of the future.
Yeah, their dreams about
Right.
what they were going to do with their lives. Sometimes people feel guilty because, for example, they might want to travel with their family, but be concerned, now that they have this diagnosis, is it really safe to go far away from my doctor, you know? And so they say that to their family member, and their family member may, come on, you know, let's plan, let's do it anyway. But there's that hesitancy that comes along with it. For a lot of people, making the step to using a cane or using a wheelchair is devastating. You know, it shakes their vision of themselves as being fully functioning.
Takes a lot out of a person, psychologically, emotionally,
yes,
and physically.
Yes.
Okay.
It takes quite a bit out. It also, I think it's important to mention that depression can occur. Depression statistically occurs in higher numbers in the population of folks with MS than in the normal population.
Really?
And we don't know whether that's because of the changes that are taking place in the brain or because it's such a hard illness to live with.
Yeah.
And it affects so many areas of a person's life. But we don't really worry about why the depression's happening. Instead, we focus on the treatment.
Right.
And that's something that's almost easier to deal with than the MS, certainly, because there
are treatments available for depression.
Good treatments,
Right.
and it can be either medication or therapy or combination of medication and therapy that helps people address how they're coping.
Sure. Now, when you say therapy, are you thinking mostly individual therapy, or sometimes maybe marital or family therapy be helpful too at certain stages of the disease?
All of the above.
All of the above.
Yeah. Also support groups.
And support groups.
There are a lot of support groups that take place in the community, and of course they each have their own personality depending on the people involved. For example, I do a telephone support group.
Oh my goodness, tell me about that.
Yeah, well, a lot of the folks that are in my group are really homebound. They aren't able to get to a group, or it's just too difficult to go through the getting dressed and ready, taking the ride, coming home. So we chat once a month on the phone about what it's like to live with MS.
Okay. I've never heard of this type of a group before.
Yeah.
And you're smiling, so you love doing it.
I love doing it.
Okay.
Yeah. It's yeah. And people can be in the comfort of their own home.
Okay.
Yeah.
So those are some of the treatments that are available. And I think when we were preparing for the program, you mentioned that there's a new pill also as part of a possible treatment for some of the MS?
Yes.
Okay.
There have been a number of treatments on the market over the years. Most of them have been self-injecting medications. So people have to give themselves shots, either every day or every few days or once a week, depending on the medication. And that can be very difficult. Some people are needle phobic and they don't want to give themselves shots. And it's a huge hurdle to overcome.
Okay.
There are also medications that are administered at the hospital intravenously that help. And now this new oral medication that came out this calendar year is helping people feel a little bit more comfortable about taking medication. And then there are also plenty of medications to help with the symptoms.
Okay.
You know,
so the symptoms might be improved, but the disease, you said there's no cure.
There's no cure, but the medications that exist and are approved for MS treatment slow the progression.
Okay.
And the sooner someone can start on them, upon being diagnosed, the better.
Okay. What about alternative therapies? You hear a lot about alternative therapies for certain illnesses. I'm thinking maybe, what, yoga. Acupuncture, biofeedback. Those are the things off the top of my head. Are those things helpful to MS, or are they just maybe an adjunct, or are they not helpful at all? Is there any research on that?
I'm not familiar with the research.
Okay.
There is research, but I will say that alternative therapies are thought to be very helpful. I think yoga is particularly helpful, and the reason is that yoga addresses both sides of the body symmetrically. I don't know how much yoga you've practiced, but when you do something on one side of the body, you do the same thing on the other side of the body, and that's good for the brain and good for balance. And since balance is an issue in MS, it can be very helpful to practice yoga. Meditation can be very helpful to...
For lots of things.
Yeah, for lots of things, that's right, yeah. To help people cope.
Sure. Now let's think a little bit here. From the 20s to 30s, children are grown. They've had various, maybe progression of the illness, maybe a few relapses, and maybe they're older now and might need nursing home care or assisted living care, or even congregate housing, depending on their family situation. Are there places that specialize in MS? I know all nursing homes, for example, will work with that, but are there nursing homes that specialize in it? Are there assisted living facilities that specialize in this?
There are 2 nursing homes in Massachusetts that specialize in MS. One is called the Boston Home, and the other one is called the Leonard Florence Center for Living, and that's in Chelsea. Both state-of-the-art. I mean, they're wonderful facilities. I've visited at both of them. And I know, for example, at the Boston Home, they have reading groups where you listen to books on tape and discuss the book. And they have a physical therapy room, and they have a computer room where the residents who live in the nursing home connect with young people who are in high school who are doing community service projects. There's a real investment in keeping people stimulated, keeping people active in the community. And also the Boston Home has a day treatment program for MS. And individuals come from all over, and they go to the State House and they go bowling. And these are people in wheelchairs that active in the community.
So they're being as active as possible for as long as possible with a cohort of people with the same diagnosis.
That's right.
Okay, so they have a community.
That's
they don't
right.
feel isolated.
That's right.
That must be another terrifying feeling, that feeling of being isolated that no one understands.
Right. Well, there's the no understanding. You know, people who you see on a regular basis have no clue what you're going through. But there is also the physical isolation because people are trapped in their homes or can't, need to ask someone to give them a ride somewhere. That's why I do the phone group, because it's easy to connect with others.
My thoughts about this is a more expansive topic that we can possibly cover in our time here. But we've been covering so much territory, and I'm wondering about particular things that we might be able to tap into for someone with MS, or maybe their neighbors or their neighbors. Their neighbors, not just their family, but their neighbors, to help people understand a little bit about what's going on internally. some hope for the person with MS too. Because believe it or not, we're going to be winding down in a few minutes.
Okay.
So I don't know if we can maybe tap into some of that.
Of resources or
resources? It might be books or magazines or videos that are out there, or just verbalizing. How can we help the person with MS, and how can the person with MS help someone else to understand? Like there's a mutual benefit there, isn't there?
Yes,
One would think.
There is. I think that discussion is important. I think educating oneself. If you're a family member of someone who has MS, I think it's really critical that you go to the National MS Society website and start to learn a little bit about what it's like. They also do a lot of educational programming so that people can learn about symptoms, medication, insurance, nursing home issues. I mean, anything and everything. They have vast array of programs. They also have a lending library for folks with MS. And you can, get the listing of the books. I have a couple of books that I brought with me.
Thank you.
One is Multiple Sclerosis, A Guide for Families by Rosalind Kolb. And it's a really thorough book that has different topics that might be of interest to anyone who is curious about MS.
Thank you. We'll put that on our website, on the website at the end of the program.
Great.
Right?
Okay.
Thank you.
Right.
And I see something
I have
else
another
there.
one. This is if you are have a family member who is living with more advanced MS. This is a very useful book. And if you intend to try and have that individual remain at home, this is a book, it's called Caring for Loved Ones with Advanced MS, A Guide for Families. And that's put out by the MS Society.
I'm imagining that somewhere in that book there will be something that helps the family understand when it's time to enter a nursing home.
Yes.
Because some people, you don't want them to feel guilty about something that might be necessary. You know?
It's really important to know your own limits. If you have someone at home that you're caring for, it's critically important. Frustration can build up, and you don't want that to happen.
No, we don't.
So those conversations need to be open. And
I want to thank you for coming today. Thank you so much. And I want to thank you for watching the program. I certainly hope this has been an interesting and illuminating program for you. Until the next time, thank you.